Hello, everybody. My name is Masa, and today I'm going to be interviewing Nilofar, a student in the University of Groningen doing her master's degree in journalism studies. So, the main interest in doing an interview with a journalism master's student, in specific in Nilofar, is to get insight on what it is like to study that degree in great depth, because it can be very, very relatable to communication and information studies. We're studying either degrees or both of the degrees can grant somebody with a great skills to pursue major goals in developing society and also to know how to use communication as a really powerful tool to make the world a better place. So in this interview, we're going to be getting Nilofar's in-depth insight on this master's degree and also her opinions and her views, which varies based on her specific background. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. Good afternoon. Today we have the lovely Nilofar, Nilofar from India. She's a master's student. She is 29 years old, and today we will interview her about her journalism studies and even how her prior studies of studying law in India, how they impact her current studies in the Netherlands in the University of Groningen. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to study journalism here?
I was working at a law firm in India up until 2020, which is when the pandemic happened. And towards the end of 2020, I think it was somewhere around November, that I decided to quit my job because when COVID started in India, I mean, fake news and misinformation were always a huge part of, the Indian information ecosystem. But with COVID, everything just got really accelerated because everybody was working from home, and there was no real checks in verifying information or actually what was going on. There was a lot of misinformation, and I think as an individual, it just frustrated me a lot. And I know it sounds like, oh my god, I woke up one day and just quit my job and then decided that I wanted to be a journalist. It wasn't like that. I think wanted to use my existing privileges for something that I actually care about.
Oh, yeah.
And in India, we have a serious dearth of good journalism. Nobody trusts the media anymore. There's like all the major media outlets are bought out by the government, and so there's a need for people to not just. I personally don't believe that you need a master's degree to be a journalist, but you do need the master's degree to understand the industry, to make sense of what is going wrong, so then you can, then use your existing capabilities to try to make it right. So that was the reason why I am here.
Okay, and do you think like the Western perspective of teaching journalism and in the University of Groningen, do you think it can apply to how you would like to implement journalism in India?
Okay, I think that's a very interesting question. Actually, when I started my studies here in September, I remember points where I used to be extremely frustrated about the nature of the academic readings that we had to do. They were authored by people from the global West, the global North. They were only conducting case studies on countries from the west of the world, like not countries. Very rarely have I seen countries from the global south used as an example by an academic researcher here in the west. So I think there is this imbalance in powers between the global south and the global north, and it's very reflective in the way that the course is structured. I have to be honest about it. However, this block, I chose to study, to do a specialization on global journalism, and that has been extremely refreshing because all the readings ensure that there's a good, healthy mix from people in academia from all over the world, not just the West, but also taking into account the works of authors from, for example, India, Brazil, places like that. So I cannot blame everything on the structure and how it's been made, but an honest answer would be that we still need to work a lot on understanding that journalism just doesn't exist in Western countries. It exists in all kinds of countries all over the world, and even in countries which are not essentially democratic in values. There is this understanding that if for good journalism to exist, the country has to be a democracy. But then what about places like Iran, where journalists are, putting their lives at stake to produce good journalism, even when they face, the worst possible lashbacks from the government?
Yes, I agree. And that leads me to my next question, which you mentioned global journalism. So what other courses do you find appealing to you as a journalist who's trying to change the maybe narrative of certain political standards or also social standards in general? So what courses?
I think the good part about this master's is that there is again a balance between theory and the practical aspect of journalism. And while you can just go to a newsroom to learn what journalism is, that's often overlooked in a master's program because most of them tend to be very theory heavy. But the other part of my course that I really like is producing journalism. So we started with writing, and then now we're producing pieces on radio. And I feel like when I came here, it was with the idea that as a journalist, I'm going to write. That would be my choice of medium. But because I'm learning these new skills, I've also recently developed a love for using my voice to tell stories, and I think sometimes it's more impactful than just reading a piece of journalism on paper, because with voice you have the ability to transmit emotions. Even if you're doing it like as a journalist, you cannot be emotional. That's what they teach us, the very first day, journalism 101. But I feel like there are several ways to put. You don't have to cry or be angry to show emotions. Your voice can tell how you're feeling in a certain place.
Yes, that's very true. I recently read something about how journalism constantly teaches you to be completely unbiased, but is that really the true essence of journalism? Sometimes people are emotional, like journalism is like so sometimes targets very emotional and sensitive topics. So emotion can come into play without having a certain bias. And I'm also wondering, like, on a personal aspect for you, like, do you think journalism is a fulfilling a degree or a fulfilling path you can take to pursue change or pursue your goals in the world or in your own I don't know, like in the world, yes, or in India, maybe?
I think that one of the reasons why I chose to specialize in global journalism was that I do not want my work to be solely centered around India, because a very important development in the 20th century has been that of migration. You can be Indian and have lived your entire life in America. What does that make you? Does it make you an Indian? Does it make you an American? Does it make you an Indian American? So there are parts of your identity that you will carry everywhere, but with communities becoming more and more intertwined with each other because of migration, because of the birth of diasporic communities. For example, you may end up having a career in the Netherlands, but you will also be able to bring stories from where you belong and tell it to the people here without having, without viewing it from the lens of somebody who grew up here, which is very important. I think there needs to be a dialogue for generations. Countries, for example, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, the only reason why you see them in news is because it's a poor country. People don't have toilets to go to, apparently, so they're taking a dump on the street. Does that actually happen? Maybe you would have to visit these countries to see. So it's really, I think, surprising and also appalling to a certain extent to see how long we've given into this idea of that people in the West are going to be showing the rest of the world what a country is, as opposed to contacting someone in that country to be able to give a more balanced and rounded opinion of what these people are about.
Yes, that's very true. And I think that's one of the important aspects of having such an international
Yes.
course, because people like you from all around the world can come and try to fix this narrative and expand this narrative as well. So I was also wondering, as like in living in the 21st century in 2022, back in the day, journalism used to be very important because people just had newspapers and stuff like that. But now, as social media is growing and all of that, do you think journalism in its most pure essence, do you think it's a powerful tool that we can use, or do you think it's slowly diminishing in power, or maybe it can be adapted to the way the world is improving?
I think how I would approach that question is by saying, instead of evaluating whether journalism is relevant or not anymore, it would be how has all of these changes influenced the role of a journalist, how much, like what a journalist meant to society before the advent of technology and social media, how much has that changed now? Because we can't be sitting here in this day and age saying that we fulfill the exact same things as a journalist did back when newspapers were the only things we relied on for information. Now the information ecosystem has changed. From paper, it's come on to this space called the internet, where everybody gets to participate, everybody has a voice. So I think journalists are more now so the internet is filled with a lot of noise, and to be able to make sense of all the noise, I don't think is a capability that someone without journalistic abilities can do. Yes, you can consume information, you can transmit information, you can have an opinion about it, but does that make you a journalist? Before I came here, I thought anybody could be a journalist. But I think the amount of time we spend researching, asking why, like always asking why is this happening, is what you need journalists to do now, and also to be able to reach the right kind of information to your audience from all the kind of informations that exist. I think journalists now are more like guides, guiding their audience to what they should be caring about, rather than people who just overwhelm the audience more and more with it, because information is something that's already available. One of our professors said in a class that journalism is what you make with information that already exists. You're not inventing information, it's all there. It's about how you package that to have an impact on your audience.
And that's where bias comes into play, where it's a bit of a tricky balance. So you mentioned something about somebody having journalistic abilities. What do you think defines a journalist, or what do you think defines somebody to have powerful journalistic abilities? Or do you think that's subjective or dependent on which area you decide to
I think every journalist has probably something to contribute to the craft that someone else may not be so good at. For example, someone may be great with their voice and may create a great radio piece, but suck at writing.
Yes.
So I don't think there's a common scale to evaluate what who an impactful journalist is. But journalistic abilities, I think one thing that is very basic, no matter what medium you choose to specialize in, is what we call the nose for news in common parlance. Is like when you see something, you immediately question what's going on, why is it here, and why is it interesting to me, and then try to see if it also is going to be interesting for your audience, and then try to get to the root of the issue. And what is news is something very basic. It could be someone you see on the street that thousands of people are passing by, but you as a journalist should know that there's a story behind that.
Yes, that's true. Where everything you can see can have a captivating story or a powerful story. So I want to ask, in the context of University of Groningen, do you think this degree was what you expected it, or did it exceed your expectations, or did it surprise you in any way?
I think 6 months into the program, it's I would say that I definitely do not regret spending my money and my time to be here. I do not regret that. I think it's a very well-balanced course. But having said that, I also think that studying journalism in 1.5 years is also an inhumane task. Like, there's just so much to know every day, and also the fact that as an international student, you're not just coping with your studies, but also trying to get your footing in a foreign country with a very different culture, and it takes everybody has their own time to takes their own time to adjust to your surroundings. So especially from the perspective of an international student, I would say that it definitely is overwhelming. Yes, I cannot say that I'm breezing through it. Definitely not. But is it all worth it in the end? Well, I think there's still a lot of time to go before I can say that. But I can say that I definitely think that it was the right decision to be.
Yes, it seems like a tough challenge, but something that is rewarding in the end, which is great. I mean, that's the whole essence of the university. And yeah, I think we covered basically most of everything we would like to discuss. It's very interesting to have a conversation with you, because I know you're more interested into the more social and maybe political side, based on your background as well. So it's a really interesting insight coming from you. And yes, thank you very, very much for this interview. And yeah, goodbye. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you learned something new today with our interview with Nilofar, and also got some insight about the master's degree in the University of Groningen, and also about journalism as a whole and how it relates to communication and information studies, and also the world we live in today. Thank you and goodbye.